For 34 years of my life, I hated my father. And I'm only 35. Which means in the last year, something really big changed. And before I tell you what exactly changed, I'm going to tell you why I hated him so much. Now I'm going to get a little vulnerable in here, and I would like you to join me on this journey. My father, he was an absent father. What does that mean? It means he wasn't there. Don't get it twisted. He was physically there. He was taking the family photos. He was financially there, helping with school. Today I want to talk to you all about how my father was emotionally absent and the damage it did to me. Growing up, I would look for my father's hand to grab mine so we could walk in the park. I didn't get that. Growing up in high school, when I was lost, I needed someone to talk to. He was there, but he really wasn't. And I never forget the day one time, not too long ago, I saw a father pick up his son and look him in the eyes and say, "I love you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." I didn't get that. I can't tell you the truth. It hurt. It hurt all those years. And what that did, it built up so much anger, so much hate, and so much fear. I used to pick on my own father. Imagine a little boy who would grow up and literally pick on his own father. My father didn't even know it was coming. He just, every single day, I would say it until you got used to it. To the point where I would say something to him to belittle him, and he wouldn't even respond. He would just stay silent. Because in some way, he maybe knew the truth. Anger, hate, and fear. I had anger towards this man who was cold, distant, wasn't able to just connect with me. It got me mad. Then I had hate towards myself. Because as a kid, I wasn't worthy of it. So I just hated myself. And the third thing, fear. Fear that the women I was dating in my life eventually would be emotionally absent, like him. Would you call that a bad cycle? Shake your head. Yeah. The concoction, the combination was not cool. And for 34 years of my life, I was living in that. I had basically a boulder on my back. It was so heavy. Till one day, when I was judging him, which I did my whole life, I went from judging him to something else. I went to curiosity. When curiosity came, I took a step back and I looked at the whole picture. I asked myself a simple question. Why is he like that? Why is he like that? And with that question, I started to see some answers. My father was just doing what he knew. He's just a replication of what he was taught. How can he know better? Ladies and gentlemen, that boulder started to shift off me a little because empathy for this man started to help me breathe a little, especially when I was around him. I can't tell you enough, that was just the first little baby step. Then my friend Peter Larson said, "Francesco, why don't you write him a letter?" And then I looked at him, I go, first of all, I don't write letters, and second of all, I don't even like the guy. He goes, "Listen, writing the letter will help you. Forgiveness will set you free. Just give it a try." You see, I trust my friend Peter, so I decided to take this opportunity to do it. So I got a paper and a pen. I sat down, and I just started writing. I'm not going to lie to you all today. When I first started writing, it felt like the fakest thing in the world. I was like, what am I doing? I really don't forgive you. Yeah, okay. Peter told me to do it. But as the seconds went by and more words were being poured out in my heart, and the empathy, the key to that was the empathy that I just told you about before, I noticed I was starting to forgive, and I can tell you that it was coming from my heart, into my head, into my eyes, hitting the paper. The tears were pouring down to the point I couldn't even wipe it anymore. The paper, which had ink on it, was smudging, but I just kept writing. The biggest epiphany I had was the moment I stopped forgiving him, just to move to another part of the letter, was the moment I started to forgive myself. I lived 34 years of my life hating him. 34 years making fun of him. 34 years of just unnecessary hate. And I had to forgive myself. Because if not now, when? I finished the letter. I translated the letter into Italian so he could understand it. I flew all the way from Germany to America. I said, "Can I please speak to you?" He said, "Sure." I asked him to sit down. Then he looked at me and goes, "Oh man, this is serious." I said, "A little. Please take a seat." We sat down. I unfolded the letter. These are the actual words from the letter. I unfolded it 3 times, and I could tell his hands were getting a little nervous, similar to the way I am right now about to share. I asked him, "Dad, please hold this side of the paper. I want to read it together. I don't want to do this on my own." I began reading the letter to start it off, and then he carried on to the next paragraph. His voice was trembling way more than mine was right now. And as we were reading, we were both crying. Me more than him, but he was still on the same journey with me. Put away the letter. He looked at me and he said, "I'm sorry. I never knew. I was just doing what I know." We stood up and we hugged. And then he finally said the words I've been longing for my whole life. "I love you." He said it. I was waiting for it all those years, and it felt so glorious. That was an amazing, amazing day in my life, and I'll never forget it. A few weeks later, my father was going to work. I was already back in Germany. My father was walking on the sidewalk, and on the sidewalk there was a crack. His foot got stuck in the crack, causing him to trip. And as my father tripped, his jaw was out to protect himself. He didn't know what to do. He slammed and smashed his jaw and shifted it, injured his neck so severe that he was rushed to the hospital. The doctor said, we don't know how you're not paralyzed." It was a miracle. My father was in rehabilitation for a long time, and I went to go visit him, of course, right after this. As I was visiting him, I was in the kitchen making him coffee, because Italians love espresso, right? We have to drink our coffee every day, all day. So I'm making him coffee, and my niece and my nephew were in the other room. My father, with his walker, because he needed assistance, was walking towards the kitchen, sad. He approached me, put the walker on the side, put his left hand on my shoulder, his right hand on my other shoulder. With all his heart and energy, he said, "I'm scared." And then I had to hold him because he was so weak. And I said, "What are you scared of, Dad? I'm right here." And he goes, "I'm scared I'll never walk or be normal again." And then he collapsed, and I had to hold him tight, almost as if now I'm the father and he's the son. And I said, "Dad, I'm here for you. We're all here for you." And the vulnerability that I saw that day, I've never seen before. He just let out the cry so loud because the fear that he will never walk or be normal again was there. And he allowed that happen because of what happened, our conversation earlier. While we were both crying, my niece and my nephew ran into the kitchen. And when a child sees adults crying, especially two that they don't normally see crying, they get worried, right? They started to cry and they go, Zio, that's uncle in Italian. Why is Nono crying? I said, he needs love right now. All four of us in that kitchen gathered up and we held each other tight. Earlier, when I told you about my father and I with the letter, that moment was our reboot moment. We started fresh. The moment with my niece and my nephew and my father in the kitchen, that was the moment that the cycle was broken. The cycle that my father had learned from his father. The circle of life is rather simple. You have a circle, and at the top of the circle was my grandfather. His name was Francesco, like me. Along with his traditions and along with his language and the way of living, and a big Italian nose, by the way, he passed that over to my father, along with how to raise a child. My father, along with the genes, the language, the traditions, and the big Italian nose, still got it, passed over how to raise a child. You see, now it's up to me with the genes and the language and all that I just expressed to you and how to raise a child. It's up to me to break that cycle. And in that living room, it was already proof that the cycle was already being broken for my niece and my nephew. I also learned something really, really serious and really deep. It's a quote I love to share with you. It's, hurt people hurt other people. Happy people, well, they help other people. My father was feeling pain and hurt within from the way his father was treating him and the way his life was. And you know what happens? He just projects that onto me. I understand that now, and I have way more empathy. Ladies and gentlemen, it took me a long time to realize this. I was a victim for 34 years. After realizing it, I would say I'm a survivor, and we're survivors because we're growing as a family. I'm not saying that writing a forgiveness letter is going to cure everything and have a magical happy ending. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if there's someone out there, whether your father, whether your mother, whether a friend, whether a partner, whether someone who burned you, hurt you, forgiveness is about setting you free. And eventually it could also set them free. Not free to do it again. Not free to say, hey, that was okay. I'm not saying that. I'm saying taking an action step. Some movement towards you saying, I will not live with this boulder on my back anymore. I'd like to leave you off with a question. If you're living with that pain within towards someone, what's taking you so long to forgive? What's taking you so long to forgive? Because if someone were to tell me when I was younger some way out, I wouldn't have waited 34 years. Thank you very much.